I'll be speaking to Faisal Saleh. He's Palestinian American, a retired businessman, and founder of the Palestine Museum US, which is located in Woodbridge, Connecticut. The museum, which was established in 2018, was the first Palestinian museum in the Americas. It has 6,500 feet of exhibit space, and its mission is to tell the Palestinian story through works of art. Good afternoon, Faisal.
Good afternoon to you, Stan.
We're not going to talk about art so much as the corporate media in Connecticut and its coverage of Israel's warfare against Palestinians, particularly those in Gaza. So first, let me ask you, where is your family from in Palestine?
My family originally comes from a village near Jaffa, 5 kilometers east of Jaffa, called Saleh. And they were expelled from there in 1948, became refugees, and ended up in the Ramallah area. And that's where I was born there 3 years later.
Mhm.
And I attended public schools there and eventually came to the US to finish the last year of my high school.
What year was that?
1969, the year of Woodstock and the landing on the moon.
Okay, you didn't go to Woodstock or the moon, I take it.
No, but I went to a couple other concerts later at the Yale Bowl. I got to see the Grateful Dead and Grand Funk Railroad.
Uh-huh.
That will give people an idea what generation I belong to.
All right. So I mentioned you're a businessman, or were until you retired. What kind of work did you do?
I did a lot of entrepreneurial work, but mostly focused on employee benefits administration technology. It's kind of not a household expression, but mostly people who run businesses deal with it. And as employees, as an employee, you would enroll in employee benefits options each year in the fall.
Mhm.
And my business was to create technology that manages all that activity and functionality and the information behind it, and pass that information the appropriate parties like the payroll systems, the insurance carriers who will administer eligibility, etc. Now, if
I'm
I don't
sorry.
want to get into it because
You can get into
I
the
could
weeds.
talk hours about it.
All right. So let's get into the serious subject of the day. What do you think of the corporate media coverage of the warfare, especially the Connecticut media?
Well, the Connecticut media and the national media are both are really not practicing journalism anymore. Like journalism as we know it does not exist anymore, and I will explain that in a minute. That people like Walter Cronkite, Eric Sevareid, Howard K. Smith, Peter Jennings, Dan Rather, these people will be appalled if they saw the state of journalism in the US right now. Instead of journalists, we have cheerleaders for Israel, basically. When they interview somebody, all they do is shake their head in agreement with what they hear, and they don't ask a single question, and they don't question anybody. And when they ask a question, they don't do any follow-up to the answer. That usually the answer is very lame and unbelievable. I could give you examples later if you wish.
Sure.
Again, I'm in Connecticut. I'm speaking out of experience because I've been here for over 5 years running the museums, and I've had journalists representing different media outlets in Connecticut here, and some I was impressed with. Others I really, question, what kind of background they have, and what kind of principles are they operating on? One of the relatively more favorable experiences I had was with Connecticut Public Radio, and I thought they, under the circumstances, they did a great job, at least in comparison to what some of the other networks have done. So, usually with Palestinians.
Was this after
Sorry?
October 7th? Was this after October 7th or sometime?
Yes, it was after October 7th. And I was on a show that it's called Where We Live, and it's a show that airs usually at 9 a.m. on Connecticut Public Radio. Again, I was very grateful to the team that worked on it, and they did a very good job at it. In general, the way the mainstream media treats Palestinian issues, first they try to ignore it as much as possible. They don't seek that kind of coverage, and the only time they try to cover it is if it becomes absolutely necessary or it becomes kind of imposed on them. For instance, when the Gaza thing happened, that was something that they couldn't get away from, really, and they had to deal with it. And but in the absence of that, it's very difficult to get any of these mainstream medias. I'm talking about the three major networks, for instance, and some of the other miscellaneous outlets.
Now, I understand you were interviewed by ABC TV.
Yes,
Talk about that.
Yeah, that happened about a couple of months ago. I was visited by Sarah Cody, who's a reporter with News 8, the ABC affiliate here in New Haven, along with a camera person. And the interview went on for a while. I think maybe we were considering the time that the camera person did take in videos of the artwork around the museum and the discussions I had with Sarah Cody. It was like about an hour. And I thought like in a day or two, I would see that on TV. And so I waited a while, then I inquired, and I was told that they were trying to figure out how they're going to place it. And then I waited, a couple more weeks or 3 more weeks, and inquired again. They said they were thinking of putting it on after the holidays, and they were referring to the Thanksgiving holidays. And so that passed, and we're like today, the 11th of January. So I put in a voicemail for Sarah Cody, and I'm waiting to hear back. So I'm just curious to see what the story is now. So it is obvious to me that these networks are not in a hurry to cover anything related to Palestine, unless it's negative and damaging to the Palestinians and serves the purposes of Israel. So from my comments, you would conclude that the major networks are biased in favor of Israel. They are pro-Israel. And when they start the conversation with somebody, they're basically acting that they were representing Israel and not being an independent journalistic organization. So to them, it's like them and us, them being the Palestinians and us being the good guys, the Americans and the Israelis. And they didn't ask me if they want to speak for me, and they didn't ask a lot of the people in Connecticut if they authorize them to speak for them. So I think the media is out of touch with what the people are thinking. The people in Connecticut.
I wanted to ask you about one particular interview that was published by Dan Haar. He interviewed you for a print newspaper, the Hearst newspaper. It was not a very favorable piece, but let me start. He quotes you as saying, Israel is as big a terrorist as anybody else. What did you mean by that?
Well, I meant exactly what I said. Israel practices terrorism, and they do that in the West Bank, and they've been doing it throughout the years of the occupation, the last 56 years or so. I'll just give you one small example of how they terrorize people. The Israeli soldiers in the occupied area, particularly in areas like Jerusalem and Bethlehem and some of the major areas, they receive orders from their superiors to go out and find 2 or 3 homes every night, break down the doors at 2 o'clock in the morning, go inside, turn everything upside down, humiliate the parents, and scare the children out of their mind, and then leave. And they do that without any reason, no suspicion. There's no indication of any of these homes that they were picked. They were picked for any reason. They are picked randomly. And I'm not making this up myself. This is testimony that former Israeli soldiers are saying to the public.
I heard one of those soldiers, I believe it was New York, and he told the exact same thing. He even wrote a book about it. He might be making this up.
I would consider this as an act of terrorism. Now, another act of terrorism, there be children walk into school in the streets of Hebron or Bethlehem or Jerusalem or Ramallah. An Israeli soldier notices them and stops them and make them, raise their hands, take their shirts or whatever. And if that student just made a wrong move or something, they would shoot them immediately. And, they shoot them and the person is wounded, is on the ground lying, and they prevent anyone from coming to provide aid to them. They block the ambulances from reaching them, and they wait until they bleed to death and they die. Sometimes that's not enough for them. They ended up shooting the person 3-4 times to make sure they're dead. This goes beyond terrorism. This is like sick. I mean, this is people that have no respect for human life. They would kill somebody who's on the ground, who can't hardly move, and they refuse to give them any aid. And what do you call that? I mean, well, what name anybody has for something like this?
And your examples are from the West Bank, and Hamas is not in control there.
There's no Hamas in the West Bank. And today I saw something from a scene in Gaza where there's a bunch of refugees, maybe 30 or 40 of them, walking and trying to cross the street from one bombed out section to another. And they were all holding white cloths of paper, and they were like waving them. These are the white flags of surrender or like the peaceful intention. And the first person in the line was a middle-aged woman with a little child in her hand, and she was walking. As she got halfway in the middle of the street, one of the Israeli snipers shot her. She fell on the ground. The little child ran as fast as you could imagine back to where they were coming from. Everybody else ran away, and some gentleman crawled on the ground and came to her and tried to help her. And we don't know what happened. We think she died, but that's the scene that we happened. So why would a sniper want to kill a woman like that with a child crossing the street with a white cloth in their hand? I can't understand that. I don't know what any explanation for that exists. It's the same kind of thing when they shot Shireen Abu Akleh, a sniper. Clearly, with their view, and could see that it said "press" on her chest, and yet he shot her and killed her.
Or even worse, in Nabi Saleh, they shot a 3-year-old sitting in his car seat last June.
So anyway, you really don't have to look far to find evidence that Israel is a terrorist state. I mean, look at the bombing they're doing. They're bombing entire buildings. They killed 100 journalists, and all that was targeted killing. Most of these journalists did not get killed on duty. They were killed at their homes, and Israel has a database and a sophisticated algorithms that can figure out where certain people are, and they can target them and drop 2,000 bombs on them just to kill one person and end up killing 30 or 40.
Now, I want to get back to the Connecticut media. I want to get back to the Connecticut media. So that article by Dan Haar, it was overall an attack on you, and he claimed you were a defender of a terrorist organization. How would you answer that?
Well, I wasn't defending anybody. All I was saying is that before David Haar starts, Dan Haar starts asking these kind of questions, he needs to also ask the same questions about Israel. And all I said is that there's nothing Hamas does that Israel doesn't do 100 times more of. That's all I said. And I'm not saying anyone is a Boy Scouts. I'm saying we don't need a double standard here. We need to apply the same standards to everybody. If you want to call Hamas terrorist, you need to call Israel a terrorist, because Israel is a bigger terrorist than Hamas is if you are claiming that Hamas is a terrorist. That's all I was trying to say.
Half that article was about Senator Richard Blumenthal, who had just come back from Israel. He had gone there for a solidarity visit. Haar quotes Blumenthal saying, "The Israelis are doing everything possible to minimize civilian deaths in Gaza." What do you think of that statement and Blumenthal's general record on this issue?
Liar, liar, pants on fire. Liar, liar, pants on fire. This is my way of talking to the American people, because everybody knows what I said.
All right.
I don't have to explain what I said.
But I mean, I'm talking about Blumenthal.
Yes, I'm saying about Blumenthal.
Okay.
Blumenthal does not represent the American people in Connecticut. Blumenthal represents Israel. He is acting on Israel's behalf. The American people in Connecticut are appalled and disgusted by the genocide that's going on in Gaza. And the majority, I would venture to say that the majority of the people in Connecticut don't want to see the killing of civilians and the killing of children. And I would challenge anybody to bring out people to say they like to see children killed and they like to see civilians killed. Nobody would want to see that. Yet, Mr. Blumenthal had the opportunity to ask Israel if they would consider a ceasefire and to save the lives of thousands of people. And he decided that was not necessary, that it was proper and okay to go on and killing all these people and continuing what Israel was doing. I must point out, by the way, that according to the Genocide Prevention Convention, if anyone becomes aware of the possibility of a genocide and fails to take steps to the extent they're able, then they themselves become complicit in the genocide, and they can be prosecuted under the Genocide Convention and under the laws of the countries that ratified the convention, including the United States.
Now, we do have to mention the Connecticut Mirror. That's a much smaller media outlet, but they have actually had articles critical of the Israeli government. I'm thinking of one by John Fussell and another by Shelley Altman and Reverend Stephen Yunkite. Do you read the Connecticut Mirror? Ever see those articles?
Occasionally. I mean, I'm not a well-read person. I would admit that, but I mean, I'm aware of the kind of coverage that the different publications provide. And I mean, I want to point out that it's not just Blumenthal, but it's De Lauro, it's all the representatives of Connecticut that are signing off and approving allocations of billions of dollars for Israel to continue its genocide in Gaza. And that's against international law. It's against the Genocide Convention. And they all could be subject to prosecution at a later date.
Now, as someone who's working hard against the Israeli US genocide in Gaza, I have to say that I've read trusted Israelis who do say there were atrocities by Palestinian armed men on October 7th. What do you think happened that day?
I don't know the details, and not that many people know exactly what happened. There are a lot of claims by a lot of people, and what we see in the media, is claims that there has not been any independent verification of anything that happened. So I'm not, and obviously I don't have the resources to tell you what happened. But one thing I know, that some of the claims that Israel has made were totally false. For example, their claims about the Shifa hospital in Gaza being a command and control center, and the evidence that they presented for that was laughable. They pointed to some piece of paper on the wall, and they claimed that has the names of the Hamas people that were supposed to be on duty, etc. And anybody that knows Arabic can tell you that piece of paper had the names of the week on it. It did not have any Hamas name. It was just a calendar on the wall.
Yeah,
and of course, they also pointed out there was a gym bag behind some closet there that had one rifle and a couple of other things in it. And they claimed that evidence that Hamas was storing weapons there. Another laughable example is that Israel showed a video of a bunch of men that they stripped naked, and they were all standing. And one of them had a rifle that he was raising above his head and carrying. And he gingerly walked across the way and laid it down on the ground where the Israeli soldiers were standing. And they were describing this as a Hamas fighter surrendering to the IDF. And later on, in another video, you see the same person walking and doing the same thing, except this time the rifle is in the other hand. One time it was on the left, this time it was on the right. It is so obvious that this thing was staged and it was fake.
Or that they made him take off clothing while still allowing him to still hold a rifle. I mean, it seems a little funny. And
somehow none of the other people had rifles to surrender. So why did that one person have that rifle? It's like, it's an insult to people's intelligence, but it's laughable how desperate Israel was trying to make up things and make claims that are not really true. I mean, that to me, that undermines their credibility when they're reporting things and when they're saying things. When I see somebody doing at least three, and probably there's a bunch more of those things, and each one of those is contrived, I come to the conclusion that they are making things up. So how do I believe the rest of what they're saying? So,
right. Well, I want to finish up. And what do you think the biggest need is now? Is it ceasefire, opening the hospitals? What ought to be done?
Well, obviously there are some physical needs. The people in Gaza are starving. There's no medicine. There's no food. If you see people fighting over food and the long lines of food, these are scenes that the world hasn't seen since the Holocaust. The people that are there that haven't eaten in days, the children that are starving, they have no water, and nobody has any medicine. All the surgeries being performed without anesthesia. Now, where have you seen that before? No place. And so there's an immediate need for massive humanitarian aid and massive supplies of food and water and medicine, and the activation of the healthcare facilities that they were damaged and destroyed, either reactivating them or replacing them with field hospitals to take care of the thousands and thousands of people who are injured. And the sick people are sick also because of the conditions that they're living under. Children are sleeping in the open, in the cold weather, in the winter with the rain. And, they have some people who are lucky to have tents. There's water in the tent. And people can't sleep on that. People are burning twigs to warm up at night, just to stay warm. So that's the immediate need.
The ceasefire issue, we just learned that San Francisco became the biggest city to call for a ceasefire. And then last Tuesday, Bridgeport, Connecticut, and then New Haven, which is right next to Woodbridge, is considering a ceasefire resolution. And
yeah, I mean, Stan, the American people are compassionate people. Once they saw and understood what is going on, they are supportive of the request to stop the killing, to have a ceasefire. The American people are great people, and I live in this country. I've been a citizen for a long time, and I love this country, and I wish that we can get everybody in our legislative branch and our executive branch to abide by the principles that this country was built on. This country is all about democracy, is all about freedom of speech, the First Amendment, all these things. But it seems like our representatives in Washington are so quick to trash all these things in favor of Israel. They're compromising our Constitution, our constitutional rights. They're abridging our freedoms of speech. They were going to criminalize the criticism of Israel. Why do that? Why do that for a state that's conducting genocide? Anybody that's supporting Israel now is supporting genocide, and they better be careful, because they could be prosecuted in the future for that.
Faisal Saleh, thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you. My pleasure.